Well, welcome everyone to our November 2023 Author Jam. We've got several folks here. Glad to see them. Ryan, Birgit, Dave, Tennyson, and Carol, even if you're off cam. And I think we've chatted a little bit and have a prompt. Ryan, if you want to jump in about it and kind of introduce it, or Birgit, because you were instrumental in us routing this way, in this direction.
You're good. You're okay if I enter into the all of us are feeling I would hesitate to say the loss of a monumental figure in the open space technology community and in OD in general, person by the name of Ann Stadler. And at Birgit's invitation, as in our pre-call, she reminded us of one of Ann's favorite questions to explore. And that question is, what do you love? And I could go deep there. I kind of went deep there with another group yesterday, and I'm curious as to how each of you receive that and who might want to go first.
I could go. So good morning. And I'm glad that you've raised a little imagery of Ann, both Birgit and Ryan. Yeah, because like most people, I feel a bit of like joy to think of her. And of course, a little sadness and a little, a little tenderness that's there. I did get to know her a little bit, and some of it was through the open space community and then some of the broader communities that connect around that. So I'm happy just to reflect a little bit with that prompt. Overall, hello, I sit at my desk in Utah. I'm glad to have a day to connect amongst us in the sort of unfolding yet pattern mystery that we seem to live in here in this format. And it's one of the things that I love. I love coming into spaces of learning. I love coming into spaces where I can explore my own learning. I love coming into spaces where I can prompt some of the learning that's in the group. And for me, it's not hard to hold that narrative that says, gee, maybe one of the most helpful and kind things we can do with one another is create these spaces of learning, and trust that when we create these spaces of learning, there will be plenty that grows out of them that sometimes looks like action and sometimes looks like further learning and sometimes looks like, puzzle journey or something like that. And at least in the bits of ways that I got to know Ann, I think she appreciated such journey. I was reflecting on her earlier this week, I guess it was, and it was of an experience with Ann, and it was of an experience having lunch with her and at her place north of Seattle there, and from 10 or 12 years ago, and sitting down for soup and bread and cheese, she looked at myself and the other that was there, and she said, "So what navigation systems are you using these days?" And I just loved it. Like, it was so beyond the chit chat of things. It was right into the, well, let's be curious humans together with one another, right? So that's an appreciation. And I think it shares some of the love that I have. And I think some of the context in naming Ann and others is that this is an elder. And this is an elder that I'm not done with either, Birgit. I appreciate being able to stay in relationship with in all the ways that people might name. But this is an elder in our field. And I think there's a part of me that's really wanting to honor the elders in our field and honor the eldership that some of us are contributing and trying to contribute also. So, there is a level for me that is a little more poignantly influenced by Ann passing, that also wants to step forward and say, well, what does this clarify for some of my contributions that I wish to make in our field ongoing? That some of it honors people before, and some of it is honoring the real-time tradition of create good things and try to create helpful things. So there's lots of nods in there to the open space community, to the field of participative leadership, to people who are kind and ask good questions, and all of that comes into play for me as we gather this morning and play with that little prompt. That's enough for me. Peace in the center.
I'd like to pick it up. I have so many stories. I'm not going to even attempt to do them justice. She and I were friends for 30 years, had lots of, I'd say, and I can get to Seattle, and she'd go, okay, I'm going to pull people together. We're going to gather it. She wasn't going to lose an opportunity for a playground of learning. And we had great times. I valued the friendship very, very much. My last conversation with her was about 3 weeks ago, and she and I have continued to have conversations every 3 or 4 weeks, or whenever we could get into them. And what she taught me about eldership in those conversations. And I mean, I've always known and valued Anne for not ever being at the superficial level. I don't personally have patience for superficial. I like deep conversations. I like to hang out with people that are not afraid of being in those deep places wherever they might go. And she and I wandered into quite a few things that we were each questing. And one of the things I liked was a year ago, she said, so here's parts of me that I know are really developed. And she said, but Birgit, there's some parts that I still need to work on my development. And I just thought, this is so awesome. And of course, I'm right here to help with that, because that touched another place I like to go. And let's talk about it. And so that ongoing learning, curiosity, fueled by love, but fueled by curiosity. And I think of there are many teachings to me. The one about stay curious, Birgit, stay curious till your last breath. And I just thought, what a wonderful piece of wisdom. And I will. I did a personal journey on the weekend, committing to my curiosity and to living fully, exactly as Anne taught. I've lived fully at different times, but in the last couple of years, it's been kind of hard, so I was kind of wobbling. But it's like, live fully, Birgit, till that last breath. And also taught a lot about the field. And her questions, like if I would get into something that was like, oh, I just don't know what to do with this, whatever, she'd say, stop. Okay, what is the field telling you? And it could be the field of a particular meeting method. She and I were very big fans of talking to the field of open space technology. What does the field want from us? I would have loved it if the open space technology community had got into talking about the field more. She did a lot to encourage it, but it didn't take, other things took stronger. So it's still not done. We'll maybe weave that, those of us who are here, might weave that wisdom into that community a bit more. So in conversations about eldership, in our genuine contact community for the past year, a group of us have been building an eldership group. And the launch of its first meeting is next week. And so I wrote to the people who are gathering and I said, well, in my heart, I'm dedicating our eldership group in memory of Anne, because she and another woman taught me more about eldership than anyone else. And so I'm going to be passing some of that on in my participation in that eldership group. And we decided when we formed our eldership group that that people who had contributed 10 years of service, like really helping what we were doing in the world to grow, had the prerequisite to join the eldership group. And so we hope that it's a model for people who are younger in our community to aspire in the same way, to grow themselves, to contribute, like to take, to learn, to contribute. And that's it for me. And I intend to keep having those conversations with Anne, and anybody who wants to join me, like maybe some of you here might say, let's get together once in a while and talk Anne wisdoms. I'm open for that. That's it for me. I'll check back.
You thinking of jumping in, Ryan? I see you thinking.
Well, I'm hesitant to jump in, but I'll grab this object of glass and steel here. I did not know Anne very well. I met her only very recently in a conversation that Harold Shinsato and I recorded for the Open Space Institute. And I was blown away just by her spirit. I mean, she was only in parts of the conversation, and talking about the genesis of open space technology in the Business of Businesses Learning Conference in India, and connecting that, her being and her background in TV, and to capturing that moment, and the story of Goa in expanding our now in that book, and thinking here and feeling into what Tennyson and Birgit, what you have said so far. What do I love? And thinking about Anne, I am deeply in love with the beautiful mystery of the human spirit and the music of that, for me. And that's what open space technology has come into me. And again, knowing that Anne was kind of the balance to Harrison Owen. Harrison talks about passion, responsibility, and hearing now from another practitioner that what Anne was talking about, like you said, Birgit, was love. So love and care, right? And Peggy Holman in Open Space Technology talks about this too, is that the circle invites us to walk into it and say, and to speak for what we love, to stand up and about what we love and care about. And boy, I tell you what, I am so happy to continue to be in dialogue with Anne about that, and to the spark of the torch that she put into the world, and to carry that with all of you to help, liberate that beautiful mystery. And boy, it feels so wonderful to honor her in that way, and to stand in humility of that. So I'll toss this machine back in to this.
I'd like to jump in because I'm struck by many things. I didn't know Anne personally. I knew of her and saw at least one conversation that she recorded. But I want to point out how important it is that we have elders in this field, because that means that we're about 60 or so years in the making from when the various aspects of organizational inquiry really took hold. And among the elders who meant a lot to me and still does is Peter Vale. In the same way, I would connect with Peter by telephone every few months or so, maybe even a year or so, over the 50 years since I was a student. And here's the thing, and I'm hearing it about Anne. Peter would say, hello. And I know he didn't have caller ID because he didn't like the new technology. I'd say, Peter. And he would right away say, oh, Dave, how are you? One word, he'd hear my voice. Oh, Dave, how are you? And it really reinforced my existence on earth, because I held him in such, and still do, such reverence. But I think that's what we have in our field writ large. We move along through our days, and then suddenly up ahead, we see a shape of someone who is shaping, literally shaping the work. And when we get close, if we're that fortunate, as Birgit has talked about, it lights up our spirits. And yet there could be 100 more people in that same cluster, but there's one, sometimes two, who are, beacons in the way that they say, oh, hey, how are you? What are you learning right now? What's happening in the field, as was put in the chat? It's genuine interest in us and us together, making important things happen in the world. So I really am glad that we had this opportunity to remember Anne Stadler and Peter Vale, and probably a dozen or more elders who have passed, but I like to be an elder who's living. Carol, what thought have you, since we both knew Peter and he knew us, and Anne for that matter?
I'm incredibly touched by this conversation on many levels. Birgit, I don't know how to thank you for making the subject of elders concrete. I've been aware of this in the field for a long time, and I did not know Anne well. My connection with open space is through Harrison, who I very much value as an elder in the field, and his relationship with Anne makes that connection, that they balanced each other the way you're speaking, even more poignant. I'm very much reminded of Ann Dosher, who was named the elder in the World Cafe community. And I knew her much more, I would not say in depth, but much more than I knew Anne. And I can only imagine a conversation with the two of them. And I'm particularly touched, Birgit and the rest of you, about the awareness of women in the field as elders, because I wrote the history chapter in the Collaborative Change Library with Barbara Bunker.
Yeah.
And a great deal of her article and her conversation is about how challenging it was to be a woman in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And my perspective on that was being a woman in the IT field. And we had a very warm conversation about how strong you had to be on some levels. And in another way, it was a privilege because you were accepted as being quirky and not part of the boys. And that curiosity and learning, and Tennyson, you always speak so eloquently. What I love is learning, and learning implies curiosity.
Yeah. And
I think that's the glue that has kept the core of this community together. The small Collaborative Change Library and the much bigger Organizational Development and Change, Organizational Behavior Teaching Society that Dave and Peter Vale was so central to, and bringing it out into the world. And I'm looking at Rosa and wondering where you are in this conversation, because I think you're very much in support of the elders and transferring that knowledge.
Thank you so much, Carol. I had the enormous privilege of meeting Anne. I did not know her well, but she was one of the elders in our Elders Fellows gatherings that I received a call from one of my teachers, Saul Eisen, who was the founder of the OD program at Sonoma State University. And he said, Rosa, I have this interesting letter and I don't quite know what to make of it. And so he read it to me and I said, I don't know what to make of it either, Saul, but it sounds interesting. So he had been invited to be an elder and was inviting me to join in as a fellow of his to this gathering that Peter Block had convened under the sponsorship of his elder and mentor, Angelus Arian. And yeah, and Ann Stadler was another of the elders. So there was my teacher, friend, mentor, Saul, Roger Harrison, who has since passed as well, who also spoke a great deal of love. He was one of the first people who dared write an academic article about love and publish it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I can send the link afterward. I forget what the date of it was, but it was early. And that was the place where I had the enormous pleasure of meeting Anne. And it was fascinating because I remember, I think Peggy was there and Peggy introduced me to Anne and we started talking about open space and I was blown away because I had no idea that she had been such a, so what would the counterpart to seminal be? So we say ovarian aspect of the genesis of open space. And what I loved was how she shared her wisdom through her stories in this very natural and spontaneous way. She said, well, I could tell you a story about that. And then she started telling this story and it was just so, it's like, wow. She was very unassuming yet grounded and clear in her what she had to offer. This very, I don't know, it just felt like this very heart combination of just very full in her presence and yet very light and unassuming. Lots of sparkle in her eye, and it was amazing. And ever since then, we've been Facebook friends, and she'll post these things and I'll comment on them and she responds to everybody. So, I've not had the privilege of having a lot of experience with her, but it was a really unforgettable meeting. And as I said, it's just continued in the form of, I was so deeply moved by one of the most recent posts she made from her hospital bed, just like, here I am, yeah. So I'm deeply moved that this is an opportunity to remember and to honor her and to make plans to continue to speak to her, whether she's in her physical body or not. And I also want to remember Angie, because that was I had never met her in person before either. And oh my. And Roger. So those are 3 people from the Elders Fellows who are no longer with us and who are very much with us. Yeah,
Hmm.
both, especially now at this time of year when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. And my friend Christy Lee Engel, who I had not been in touch with very much recently, sent me an email with the news of Anne's passing. And I just felt like, oh, here's Anne helping people connect yet again. So, oh, there's an email list. Thank you. Thank you. And there's also a document which I'll post where people can write. And I just got an email again from Christy saying, oh, Rosa, I enjoyed seeing what you wrote. And I just want you to know that I was with her family, and her family says that they are all getting together and reading that everybody has written. So, yeah.
Wow.
Thank you all.
Wow.
Rishan, thank you. This has been unexpectedly human and rich, relationship based at its depth.
Well, I'll jump in for a minute here just to appreciate all of it, because I think that my journey right now is has always been rooted in teaching, from the time that I was a kid on the playground, helping someone learn how to like use something on the playground, all the way up through being like a counselor at a camp to into college and helping my professors, and then into my work. And I think what pushed me there even more so is that I went into technology, and there's a bit more of a wall up there, and I needed something more as a teacher. And so I say all this to say how grateful I am to be listening to all of this, because part of becoming connected to Dr. Katie and Teo and Nexus was that call that Dr. Katie made in my master's program for the next generation, where things are going to be handed off to. And so I hope to love Anne through you, and what stories you can pass along about her, or the stories that she shared, and along with all the others that have passed. I hope that would also make her happy to know that there's folks like myself who actively want to receive that. And so I just look forward to bringing her and others into those conversations, because that's the part that I feel like when I come into a room like this, you're all sponges. You've soaked all that up, and then I want to be the next sponge, right? And the folks, if you can imagine, the folks that are going through change and all over, but particularly in my field, are not so sponge-like. So
Yeah.
I need to go and be around those who I feel are a bit like me, and who want to both soak in as well as to provide that knowledge to others. So that's
Yeah.
going to be my contribution.
I
To
think
be
that's one.
spongy?
Exactly,
Well,
Ryan.
you know how we got to be sponges? People poked an awful lot of holes in us like a sponge, but that was part of it. We would put our thoughts out there, sometimes writing and obviously at conferences, and we'll put them out there. This is what I think. This is what I see. What do you see? And then go ahead, poke holes in it. We want that because we want to improve our argument, improve our explanation, our case. And I think that the years that I was teaching young people, there was some who were just wanted, they were covered. They didn't want whatever they would say or to be challenged and lovingly challenged. And so I think the sponge issue, I wish I'd had it back then, because I'd say, look, how can you be a sponge if there's nothing on your surface that looks like you're open to anything, that you're all closed. And the other thing I want to say, Lisa, is I love the fact that while we're talking about elders, receiving the elders is what you said, and then becoming, we haven't got a name for you off the top of my head yet, but you will be an elder one day. In the meantime, you respect and want to know what our lives were like, not just what we wrote, but how we lived, and what excited us and who excited us, and what did we do with that. So yeah, great. Thanks for the sponge image.
I think there's an action out of that, Lisa, and I don't quite know how to do it, but it would be a curious thing to explore out of this. Look at the squares with your voice coming so clearly as the next generation, and Birgit launching an eldership group. How about actively looking to have some intergenerational dialogue that would help that transfer?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Because
Yeah.
all the author jams I've been part of, other events as well, but particularly here, just allows me to be the sponge,
There
and
you
then
go.
and then give it away. I did hit a milestone just 2 days ago where my certification, it's a bit different. This isn't OD, but certification I successfully supported 100 candidates in getting their certification. So I kind of am taking my moment to
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That is an achievement. In what field?
it's a certified professional in talent development. So
Wow.
so
Yeah.
it's been a labor of love for about 3 years, but we got
Yeah.
100 candidates through. So but yeah, that's the point, right? Just a success of another in some type of change, and in this case they
Mhm.
wanted to attain that knowledge level. So
Yeah. So you're still on the playground.
yeah. Yep.
Still showing people how to use the equipment. I think that's great.
Yep. And then I think it's intentional, right? I have to do that because I get pulled so far into the technical that I've got to
Yeah. Well,
make
see,
time.
we need to know practitioners more than ever. And you are definitely one of those people who are, working the whole spectrum, the technical, absolutely, and even AI, as you've talked about, but you're also interested in us as we talk about love. I don't know if that's a manual in anything you have in the IT side. They should, but so.
Well, they won't be as successful without that openness.
No, they won't.
So
they will become suspected if they don't show that whatever they're producing has humankind kindly in mind. So we only got 10 minutes. Tennyson, you've been nodding wonderfully. Thoughts?
It's one of the things I love, just to nod at all the good stuff that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like a bobblehead here. I'll just offer a couple of things, because what happens for me when we come together like this is there's a quite robust reflective time that happens, and I'm grateful for that. I'm drawn, like Birgit, to your line from the beginning here. You were speaking about Anne, but wasn't going to lose an opportunity for a playground of learning. What a great freaking line that is, right? Because those kind of things guide to me, when we're in the midst of facilitating, we're in the midst of teaching, any of those kinds of things. and guiding groups, just to suggest a narrative that we might just be in another playground of learning here together. That's useful. I find that's heart enlivening kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you said something also about the beauty in the music of the mystery. Again, it's just like the hunger for these kinds of narratives. Because if I try to loop all of that into us, and maybe it was part of Anne, I'm going to make up some of that story, is I think we're trying to create bridges from the spaces where we legitimately talk about love. And then we bring them into very places where they don't normally talk about love. Like, I relate to that as part of the job and part of the heart calling of it all. And to claim that perhaps love centers it all, that's not just a cognitive construct. Like, it can be cognitive, but it takes some belly to stand in such a notion. And I think there are many of us that have been trying to create those kind of bridges that even bring the energy of love. So, with groups, it might be, well, what's one thing that you love about working together?
Yeah.
And to me, it's so deliberate to put love in that sentence,
Mhm.
So I like to think that there are many of us, and I just relate to this as a kind of calling in the 61-year-old body that I am now. I relate to the desire and the challenge to center any of the work that I feel like I'm engaged in or trying to be engaged in, to give it the possibility of being centered in love. And that feels like that feels like calling and really useful path to me, or the kind of path that I'm, just become more compelled by. And some of that is the poet's heart, that comes from me. And some of it is the poet's heart that shows up as a group process facilitator.
Yeah.
So that's some. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the little nudge there.
Well, Ryan, you suggested that we use this time to think about Anne Stadler, and I'd like to have you using some of those last few minutes to. You're not an elder. You're maybe a little a little older than you look, but you have a lot of piss and vinegar.
We could make a distinction too, Dave. Like, we could make a distinction here that eldering isn't the same as oldering.
Oh, I like that.
Older and not be an elder, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
there we
something
go.
about how we gain wisdom and integrate, metabolize.
Yeah. But why did Ryan? Why did Anne come to mind just before we started the recording? A little bit more about that.
It was this idea of grieving a loss, but feeling into the possibility, and having the the love as acceptance and challenge that we think about, and it just I think there was such a hopeful spirit there, and I wanted to name the grief because it's a bodily loss, a loss of body, but I believe that there's so much more than the body. There's the heart and the spirit, and then when I heard that, and this is really something I only heard yesterday from Mariah Keela, and a practitioner in open space, about Anne's speaking of love. And that, I think, is the invitation I know it is for me to say, instead of driving the breath out of the organizations we inhabit, and going faster and faster and faster, and closing the space, and just, what happens to a human being when you lose breath? You die. That's the most urgent thing. But that the challenge is to accept that invitation, to choose fear and blowing the breath out, to choose love, and to name it, and to be unafraid to name it. And I think that's in this mechanistic, materialistic garbage that we've built. To hear that there is someone who is standing for love.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
you know what, I totally want to dive into that, and I don't choose the fear, choose the love, and be unafraid to talk about it, and expand that word into meaning, amas, sharing with agape, all these other words for love, and bringing those into the places like Lisa, like you said, and like I inhabit in IT world, or had, that's this place of machinery that is screaming for love, and it's a silent scream. And I think it's, as a practitioner now, and as I want to go in for my second 26th birthday that I just had, so I've been 26 twice, 13 4 times. I want to have that be my part of my practice. And I think, Tennyson, you also said about this eldering versus the idea of verbifying that, and I think this is true about the practice that I want to have, is not othering, but it's togethering. And togethering is what we are doing now, and togethering is about the love, and to bring that word and love and togethering and togetherness and joy. Boy, how much do we need that? And the we that is everywhere, but I know I need it, and that's what I want. That's what I desire. That's what I want to stand in the circle and just sing out that I want that love.
Ryan, I'm thinking of you as 52 and thinking of 52 cards in a deck and 4 sets of 13 and 4 suits of 13, 2 26s. And you could create a whole interesting deck of cards there around togethering. 52 cards of togethering.
Yeah, and don't leave out the hearts. We only got a few more minutes, and Rosa, you have thank you for the Hutchins reference, by the way. He saw it in the chat. He does interesting stuff.
He does interesting stuff, yeah. And that was his whole post about standing in front of an audience and feeling like the most important thing isn't what he knows, but is how connected he can be with his heart. It was just such a inspiring post. I just want to say I was really inspired by what Tennyson said, because this whole notion of bridges, right? Like for a bridge to be strong, it has to be standing strongly in both sides, And so like, how do we connect with people who are in a place where the L word might shut them off, might cause them to kind of dismiss whatever you're saying? And it doesn't mean that we don't say it, but earlier, Tennyson, you had said, oh, let's start talking about, what are some of the things you love to do? And your use of the word love there was very intentional and also very subtle, right? Like you're not like, it's not capital L word, let's just get dismissed as woo-woo right off the bat, but it's just kind of like brought in there. The energy is brought in a way that, because it is, I agree fully, it's so needed. But there was just something about that image that you offered of building bridges to places where that word is not usually welcome, that I just really touched my heart. So thank you.
That lays out the work ahead. Bridget, you have a last word.
Sorry, I'm also typing in the chat at the same time. I would encourage perception of love is, it's not something like that's outside of us. I mean, we probably all have that perspective, but love is, it's a field. Let's play in it. That's it, and that I think, yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. If it is, it's not something to in any way step back from, just to be right out there. I put a resource in, Maureen McKenna and Sal Nelson. I think that's their names. I just know them as Maureen and Sal. They're close friends up here in the mountains, but they developed a blueprint of we a long time ago, I actually put them in touch with Teo because I really want their work included in what we're all doing. But they have cards and they have a process and they have incredible resources. People well worth getting to know, and also paying attention to this great body of work that they've put out. Now, Maureen is often unwell. She's lived, I mean, she's much younger than I am. She's lived 20 years longer than expected with a lung condition. So she's not always as available, but still, all this body of work is there. It's on the website. That's it for me. I've had a great time with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well,
Yeah.
when we find out how Thea's doing, please let each other know. I always miss his benediction. And I know I'm taking over the talk here, but I want to thank all of you for making the part of the hour that we did have together really worth a day or more, a week.
Yeah.
So
Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you all for
everyone.
coming in. See you soon.
Well.
You what?